appreciate you being here. So hi, everyone. Today we're going to run this a little bit differently. We're just going to get right into talking about ICAD and its role in the sonification community. And anyone can share their experiences there, but want to talk about the possibilities of presenting there and what that all entails. So you've got some of that information in the agenda, and I'm going to put that link into the chat so you've got it. And you're welcome to go on over there and record. I see everyone putting their introductions into the chat. And if you're still suffering under snow and, go ahead and I will have sympathy on all of you. It got warm here today, a whole 30 degrees. Finally got warm enough to put on my skis because it has been unpleasant. So I did have a couple of people like Bruce that said that they wanted to be here today but couldn't. And so there's interest in this topic, and make sure we get a recording off to everyone so that maybe we can generate some ICAD interest. So thanks, everyone. And what I'd like to do is just go ahead and kick right off. Give me a thumbs up someplace if you have been to ICAD. So, and I will shout your names off for those who are not seeing this. We've got, I know Bruce has been, so Robert has been to ICAD, and Bruce has, and could that be all? That might be it for today. So we'll at least get some conversation going here today. And let's start off with Bruce, can you give us a little bit of history on ICAD and then launch off into some ways that you see that from what you know of the GeoSonNet projects and the folks there, how we could benefit or contribute to the ICAD?
Absolutely. I'm pleased to be here and good to see some new and many returning faces. I'm Bruce Walker. I'm at Georgia Tech. And I've been part of the sonification community since its inception in the 90s. So originally, Greg Kramer and others saw this emerging field of sonification and wanted to create a community around it. Started two things. One was a community called the International Community for Auditory Display. The intention being that this is broader than just sonification. It takes into consideration other kinds of auditory displays. It kind of leaves warnings, cautions and warnings out and leaves that to the human factors world, leaves music, pure music to the music world, but carves out this niche of intentionally designed sounds that intend to communicate information. Yeah, there's crossover and gray area, fuzzy, all good. So the International Community for Auditory Display, ICAD, also wanted to have a conference, so they created the International Conference for Auditory Display, also called ICAD. So one is the community, one is the conference. They both exist at icad.org, where you can learn about the community and the conference. Sonification and auditory displays has been closely linked with astronomy and with space exploration, NASA missions that have sent satellites and probes into the solar system and so on. So there's this sort of natural long-running connection between ICAD, auditory display, and sort of geosciences. A lot of the early data, including some of my own and my dissertation and others, involve weather and meteorological data. It turns out that weather actually is really interesting for sonification because it has a lot of time series in it, and that fits nicely with the sonification mission or vibe. So all of this to say, there's been a long-running connection. Kelly Snook is an example of a NASA scientist that was also a longtime ICAD person. So that's kind of the history. Now, the ICAD conference started in 1996 as a small effort at the Santa Fe Institute in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Um, and after a couple of years there, it's grown into an international conference that runs every year, moves around the world, has been all over the major cities that you'd expect. ICAD draws people from the music domain and from the psychology domain, the data domain, um, display and infoviz domain, and also lots of content domains like chemistry or physics or astronomy or biology or economics, health sciences, where people have data that they're trying to understand, and sonification can potentially play a role. As we know, sonification and auditory displays can play a really be a useful tool in understanding complex time varying data. Sometimes data that are resistant to understanding through normal visual means can be sonified and sort of made understandable. Um, Sometimes we think about sonification as adding an extra layer of engagement or enjoyment for outreach or those kinds of activities. Robert Alexander, of course, is here, and NASA is great at leveraging the multimodal edutainment aspect of this as well. And of course, there are accessibility and sort of benefits in universal design that come from having multiple modalities. The ICAD conference and therefore the ICAD community has years, decades of research, of design, experimentation, tool building, and that's all great. One of the things I'll say about ICAD is a small conference on the order of 120 to 150 people generally. There's a core that kind of goes every year, and then you get people that are more local. If it's in Europe, you get more Europeans that year. If it's in, say, Asia, then you get more local Asian attendees. So there's a nice core, but also we acquire new people all the time. It's not an ACM conference. It's not an IEEE conference. It's an independent conference. The proceedings are published on the Georgia Tech Digital Archive, so they are published. They do get a DOI. They do, stand as a publication. They are peer reviewed, but they don't have the reach that they would if they were in the ACM Digital Library, for example. That's okay. That's a trade-off, right? It means that this is, sort of a tier two conference. It's very well regarded for the people that are in this space, but that's something to think about. If you can only go to tier one conferences, or if you insist on having something in an IEEE or an ACM conference, that's a consideration. What we sacrifice intentionally by not being in the ACM or IEEE organizations, we gain in family. This is a very collegial and collaborative group. Everybody goes there because they want to, not because they're getting a publication or something. So everybody that is there is, generally speaking, interested in collaborating, interested in doing the good work and getting the word out about sonification and using it for their purposes. That's a background. Um, I was going to launch into a little bit of discussion about this year's ICAD conference, but I'll pause there and see if there are questions and anything about the history of the community or the conference. If so, just jump in or throw something in the chat.
Yeah, so I have a quick question, Bruce. So I'm wondering, obviously participating in conferences like this costs money, and how does that work for attendees? Are they self-funded? Do they get funding from their organizations, universities? Are there scholarships through ICAD? Because I know we have a range of sort of ages and professional levels here that might be interested in participating, but might not have the money to go.
Great question, Adrian. Thanks for that. I'll defer part of that to when I talk about this year's conference because there's some interesting um, things to note there. In general, this is an academic style conference, so you submit papers, workshops, posters, demos, concerts. There's many formats, but you typically submit. They get peer reviewed, and if accepted, then you get a speaking slot at the conference, either as a talk or a poster or demo, whatever is suitable. Um, you pay a registration fee for the conference. For that, you can go to the conference. You get access to the conference. You can attend. There's breakfast, lunch, and conference dinner and all of that kind of thing. It's a typical conference. Because it's not high end and it's not huge, the conference fees are relatively modest. It's not that expensive. I just registered for IEEE VR and it was $1,200. It's like, hello, plus a plane ticket to Korea. So this is ICAD is a much more affordable option. Trade-offs, as I've already noted. So if you're interested in going, then it's the usual thing. You got to find funding and travel. But it's quite affordable, all things considered. So that's one thing to say. It's typically a 3-day conference with an additional day for a doctoral consortium or doctoral colloquium at the front, and sometimes workshops at the front, usually 1 or 2 days total at the front. So it can be between 3, 4, 5 days. That means you can go for 2.5, 3 days, and it doesn't have to be like a whole week. Or you can stretch it out to be a whole trip if you want. Often the doctoral consortium or colloquium has been funded by NSF and other sources so that we can basically pay graduate students to come to the doctoral consortium meeting, and then they would get their conference fee paid for or waived, and get travel stipend and so on. So there's a way to get some students to the conference for free through that mechanism. That doesn't happen every year, but that's one of the things that we try to do. So take from that what you can.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions about the sort of general background? All right, well, I'll jump into the say a few words about this year's conference because it's a little bit unique. Let's see. As I mentioned, normally the conference would be 3 days of posters, papers, demos, concerts, and all of that good stuff. It's really engaging. 3 days plus workshops and tutorials and this doctoral DC as well. It would typically be in one location, whether it's in Helsinki or Atlanta or San Diego or Kyoto or wherever. Everybody goes there. This year, we're trying something new. It's going to be an in-person conference still, not online, but it's going to be held in sort of simultaneously in 3 different locations. One location is in Troy, New York, upstate New York, in the US. The other location is in Barcelona, and the third location is Bielefeld in Germany. So those 3 locations will co-host, and the idea is that you could go to whichever location is closest to you to save travel costs, make your trip shorter if necessary, to save CO2 emissions, and make the overall attendance cheaper. And sort of also scratch the environmental itch as well. So you would have papers being presented locally, and in addition, those 3 different sites will also zoom into each other so that there's some kind of shared content as well as live content. You'd have the opportunity to interact with the people that you are physically with in that hub. And in addition, there will be mechanisms to kind of mingle in a virtual way with people at the other hubs. So we're trying this as a new way to some experiment. Nobody wanted an online virtual conference, right? We all hate those. I don't know, some people might like them, but there was not much appetite for those. And we wanted to try to balance the ecological impact, the challenges of, frankly, this year there were US-based people that don't have as much travel money as sometimes we might have. So we couldn't count on people affording to go to distant trips. There are people who did not want to leave the US because they didn't know if they could get back in. And there are plenty of people around the world who just don't want to come to the US for reasons we all understand. So it made it challenging to decide where do you put this. So the solution was let's split it up and yet somehow keep it all together. So that's the logistics of it. In terms of submitting conference papers, it will be the same as always. You will submit to the conference, will be one unified submission procedure, peer reviewed, and then you will present, and the schedule will be constructed based on where you declare that you will attend. So there'll be a little bit of scheduling jujitsu to do, but otherwise it will be like any other conference experience. Again, I'm just fire hosing as I tend to do. I'll pause there, and Kate, if you want me to say anything else, or is that sufficient burp of information to get us going?
No, I think we should pause it and see if anyone has any questions. And then I'd just like to explore, where do you see the group folks at GeoSonNet situating in terms of being of value to ICAD and vice versa? So any other questions about the conference itself? Okay. Yeah, I think I'm out of travel money in this budget, and end of July is not a good time. We're in the middle of intern programs, although Micah has already lobbied to go. So we'll see what we can do on the glass end of things. But Bruce, what the folks that have been part of the GeoSonNet and the GeoSonNet project itself, or Sonification World Chat, why can we contribute? Is there something you think we have a value to say at the conference, and what we get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say 1,000%, right? So if you are interested in learning about sonification and auditory displays, either the methods, the techniques, the applications, the tools, evaluation, research, all of that, then you can come to ICAD and learn about all of that. Talk to people and rub shoulders and chit chat. Everybody's real friendly. In terms of contributing, the converse is absolutely true. If you are doing sonification, if you are using it, or you are studying it, or you're developing tools, innovating in any way, then that's one of the best places to showcase that kind of work. Yeah, you could try to get it into Kai or to Viz or DIS or some other conference. But again, the costs and the dilution of so many other topics make those less interesting. So if you're into the sonification niche, kind of go where all the other sonification nerds are. There's a long history of, as I mentioned, of geosciences projects being presented at ICAD and being demoed, tools. We all talk about, Wanda's Xonify. That's one of the earliest tools, and some of the tools that I've been building over the years, like they're all coming out of that community, or people who are in that community or have come into and then out of that ICAD community, depending on where their career has taken. So if you have any papers at all that touch on or advance sonification or sonification methods, or if you're using sonification for physics, or you're using sonification for astronomy, or for education in chemistry, all of those are topics that we heard last year. So, absolutely.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Robert, you've been there before? Can you tell us maybe a little about your experience or why you would recommend GeoSonNet folks considering going?
Certainly. Yes, I have been there before. I actually kind of kicked off my whole sonification career back at ICAD in 2010, which is 15 years ago, which is wild. Time is weird. Um, but I presented there on my sonification of the Advanced Composition Explorer data, which was a parameter mapping. And at the time, wasn't really sure what direction the project was going to go. But Kelly Snook was there, and she became aware of my work. I then went on to visit her, spend time at NASA Goddard, got funding for a PhD program, got a fellowship from NASA, and so it all like kickstarted the whole career. And then in 2022, I came back and I gave the keynote at ICAD and was able to highlight some of that career. And then 2 years ago with Christina Collins, we submitted a paper on the MMS satellite tetrahedron. We did a binaural rendering of it and presented that. So that was one of the extended abstracts. Something that's nice is that it's kind of like whatever your puzzle piece size is, you can fit it into ICAD. So if you've got something that's fully baked and you want to present it to the world, then full papers are 6 to 8 pages long, and it gives you a little bit more room to kind of stretch out and share what you've done. But if you've got something and it's a work in progress and it's not like, the full publication yet, but you want to get it out there, the extended abstracts are 2 to 4 pages are a great opportunity for that. There's also, you can host a workshop. You can contribute a sonification to the concert. You can be a part of that think tank. So it's not like there's like many different ways that you can plug in to the ICAD ecosystem. And for the paper, the submissions, goes beyond just give us your full research paper. You can provide sonification. You can provide project architecture. So if you go on, I sent the link to the submission or the solicitation page. And they've got a kind of broad set in terms of what they're looking for this year. My experience has been that, yeah, absolutely, it was what Bruce was saying, that if you want to nerd out with the sonification people, this is definitely a happy place for you. Um, I remember first arriving at the University of Michigan and meeting the people in the Performing Arts Technology program and feeling like, oh, cool, these are my people. But then if you're interested in the intersection of data and sound, that's where I had that feeling of like, oh, wow, there's a lot of people around the world who are also transforming data into sound. So it's a good place to exchange ideas, spark new collaborations. Just always a fun group of people to grab lunch or dinner with. So it is a great environment to be workshopping your work. If you're someone who has either been in the world of sonification for a while, or if you just want to like take your toes and dip them into the pool for the first time.
All right. Well, thanks a ton. Any questions from the group?
Robert, I have a question for you. What you just said made sense to me as years and years and years ago, someone who was just getting into the field. I didn't know whether I should be pushing new ideas or just absorbing from the old ideas that I was hearing from people at a conference. And what I just heard you say is maybe there's room to do both, to be pushing and listening and making connections in real time as you're talking to people at these conferences. Is that an opportunity?
110%. Absolutely. And I think that there can be a common feeling in the data sonification community of like, have I done this right? Because sonification has been in the Wild West for quite some time, and kind of deservedly, because like there are some best practices when it comes to things like parameter mapping. We can appeal to intuition in many ways. There are synesthetic correlations between, you've got a large low frequency sound, and if you hit a big drum, it's going to have a lower frequency sound. So, like, there are these correlations that make sense, and we can explore these correlations when we do multivariate mapping, such as, the speed of the solar wind mapping into a bandpass filter that sweeps up and down over noise, and so you get like a whooshing sound that goes up and down. But at the time when I first did that, I'd never heard of anyone doing that. It just seemed like something that made sense. And so there could be researchers out there who are saying, well, I'm working with this oceanographic data, or I'm working with this data from stars, or I'm working with volcanic data, and I've decided to map it in this certain way, but it seems really experimental. I don't know how this is going to be received. Share it, because the more the merrier. There isn't a perfect way to sonify something, and that's why I love it. That's why it continues to be such a ripe field, because there's room for a variety of ways of expressing data through sound and sharing data and conveying information. And so I would say, yeah, like, take the leap, share what you've created. Also, if you've got ideas, and they're not kind of like fully fleshed out, there could be some room as well. Just kind of like take a look at the website, and I think that you'll find a way that you can plug in with wherever you are. If you want to attend workshops, if you want to gather information, there's a spot for you.
Makes good sense. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for asking the
Thank
question.
you, Rob. Anybody else?
I have a question, thank you, if that's okay.
That is
I must
fine.
admit, I feel very much out of my depth here. So this is the first time I've tried to do anything like this in terms of submitting my work to anybody. But you've made me all feel very welcome, so thank you. My question is specifically about the concert piece. And I was curious as to like in what format one is supposed to submit their work. If that concert piece ends up being live rather than being something which is a recording. I'm still toying between both of those worlds. I'm not sure which one I'm going to go down yet, but I'm just wondering how you submit to the concert section.
So the submission site will have the technical details, but typically there is a written description of what you're doing, right? So your description of your approach and the data sources, if any, and your sort of communicative intent and where you were going, right? There's a written story that goes along with this submission, and then there's an audio format, whether it's an MP4 or whether it's some other format that you contribute so that the jury can have a look at it and listen to it and evaluate it. What you end up actually presenting, if that's accepted, and if you're asked to present at the conference, could be very different. For example, if you have a surround sound, you had a 16 channel or a multi-channel installation, and you downsample it to 2 channels for the submission, and then you describe, look, if I were to present this, I would need a multi-channel array. Okay, cool. So, the conference organizers would make that happen for the conference. So it's the usual thing. Give them the reviewers what they need to evaluate it, but then recognize that it's flexible once you start talking about the actual presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Well,
And
that's
and there's
good additional.
definitely a history of full-on nerdery, right? I mean, I recall 200 attendees or maybe 180 attendees at the ICAD in Montreal, and Bose or somebody had lent us 200 headsets, and we were all sitting in the audience, like having a shared experience. It was, that kind of stuff happens at this kind of conference. Lots of surround and these different venues. So Bielefeld, Barcelona, and Rensselaer all have different facilities. So if you had a specific kind of audio experience or performance, it might be better rendered at one of those sites. So it's an interesting set of possibilities this year.
Cool. Great. Thank you.
Andy, since this is your first GeoSonnet, would you just like to tell us what you do in that area? And you're in the
Oh.
UK, so you're up way past my bedtime.
Yeah, I am almost ready for my bed. I was introduced to this by a gentleman on a Discord server called Decibels, and I have a particular interest in stars and stuff like that. And anyway, so I also am a software engineer, so I decided to try to turn my love of the universe into sound. So that's become a hobby of mine. I have a day job. Yeah, I just sit at home coding stuff which turns stuff out there into stuff into my ears. So that's why I'm here. It's as simple as that, really.
That's awesome. Well, welcome to the GeoSonnet.
Thank you.
Andy, I also just want to mention that the approach that you're taking, your excitement, your love for it, the novel way in which you're wiring things up behind the scenes, that is ample contribution. Don't have the sense that like you need to make a new scientific discovery before you can submit something. So I just want to make sure that that lands.
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've been worried about that.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to float a question out there to everybody, but Robert and Bruce can chime in mostly here. But as we are having more and more discussions about how do we continue to fund the GeoSonnet and how do we circle back to finding a submission home for the original plan for this, which included money for teams to get together and actually meet with each other. And I'm seeing that we have evidence of that synergy really starting and these groups getting together. And as we're talking about the ICAD, this fits very well with how we want to operate as a community. So, and being a small conference and everything that Robert and Bruce are explaining about who can be there and who can benefit from being there, I'm wondering, if we're looking at resubmitting the GeoSonnet proposal someplace, how important would that be or logistically feasible for us? I can figure out the budget part of it, but what do you think about putting in money for teams to attend this conference and how might that look? Thoughts on that? And those of you who haven't, how would you like that? Would that be a value?
And I can jump in, but I don't want to dominate here. But I guess I'll say that we can look for so we're creative about ways to bring in funding and then basically use it to subsidize travel for folks. As an example, if we get the NSF to support a doctoral consortium, we can subsidize the students to attend. We can also say, well, those students need to engage with experts. And so let's assemble an expert panel and let's make sure that the expert panelists also have their travel covered. So we can end up, covering or subsidizing the travel for, a dozen people. And we can do things like have a workshop or boot camp or whatever you want to think about, and find funding to support that. We can have, we're quite creative already, and if we're going after sort of larger community funds, then we could and would include both funding, raw fundings, like here's airfare, but also incentives and opportunities like, oh, maybe you don't have anything that's quite ready to submit to the conference as a paper, and your university won't let you go to a conference if you don't have a paper. So we'll give you, a 15-minute or 10-minute fireside chat slot that we can call a presentation. So, when you get old like me, you kind of get wily and crafty and ways to bring more people into the fold.
Excellent. That it sounds to me like the other part I should be thinking about is just out and out partnering with ICAD. And who is that? Because you guys all seem to run it organically.
Yeah, I think that we've talked about this, Kate and I've talked about this for some years about the enhancing the synergy between ICAD and GeoSonnet. Um, because there's no barrier between them. It's because many of the people who are affiliated with GeoSonnet who have heard about GeoSonnet also come to ICAD and vice versa. So it's an overlapping space. And I think we would just as long as sort of the GeoSonnet community, which is leans more into the geosciences, astronomy, and so on, doesn't feel excluded from ICAD and doesn't do things to kind of uh, cannibalize the space, the funding space, then I think it's all kumbaya. It wouldn't make sense to create a new conference, for example.
Right.
Just come to ICAD. Last year and for several years, we have seen ICAD proactively reach out to GeoSonnet and have sessions at ICAD specifically for geosciences. Those papers have always been at ICAD, but by lumping them together, it was sort of highlighting the importance of geosciences to the ICAD history and frankly to the future of the sonification and auditory display community.
Well, that's actually brings that back to the forefront of my mind as I'm thinking about the funding. I've been really focused on, leveraging educational pieces of this, but if there's a chance to resubmit our idea for the network again someplace, then doing something more formal with ICAD would make sense, and it would show growth over the period of this initial funding. So I think that pushing that to the top of my thought processes probably very helpful.
So basically what you're saying is you'd like to be able to show that something took.
Yeah.
After this first year or two of launching GeoSonnet, it caught someone. And that is exactly what a seed grant is supposed to be, right?
And that's part of the reason I wanted to have this meeting, because I sent it out. We've sent it out, announcements out, and about this on the site and the Slack, and I didn't get a lot of inquiries on it. So, but people were interested. There's a hesitancy, like it's not, oh my God, I'm not good enough to go to a conference about sonification. Like, well, who are these people? So I thought a conversation amongst ourselves might do that. And I'm also seeing that as we're, sparking these little collaborations, and particularly with the music departments, if we can get these going, then building toward that and be able to support people to actually get together and talk, that would be very cool. So I'd really like to do that. And like I said, I have no desire to ever organize a conference. I think that would be very frightening. So,
But would you, on the other hand, Kate, be comfortable creating a space where people can have low risk engagements with other people who are thinking about the same things they are? It seems to me like that's what we're looking at here.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I have, when you're at ICAD, is it sort of primarily academically focused, sort of nonprofit focused? Is there a space for people that are interested in the commercial applications of sonification for-profit ventures? Because that could be another potential source of funding. in terms of sponsorship? And I know that's tricky. Is it commercial? Is it not profit? And how do you navigate that? But I wonder if there might be any opportunities there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a small tent in terms of the number of people, but it feels like a very big tent. Everyone is welcome. You see people who are in the music side, you see the creative side, you see the dabblers, you see the chemists, you see the tool builders, you see people who have been there for 25 years and have all the t-shirts, right? So everybody, a bit of everything. People come. Um, Early in their career when they're just trying to get going on things, and then they go off and they do things like Kai or Viz, which feel a little bit more high profile as they try to get tenure, and then later they come back to ICAD because of the community. So you see people, evolving in and out of ICAD as a conference, but they sort of stay in the community writ large. Um, but yeah, there's corporate interests. High Charts is there all the time, and they collaborate with me. And we got talking at a conference, and um, ended up having a nice collaboration and building a tool together. And then since the tool is important for their bottom line, um, you know, they support it. And then they made a donation so that I could run a workshop in Kenya and bring school teachers from all over Kenya together and teach them how to do sonification for sort of accessibility, making education materials more accessible to blind learners. So relationships, you fundraising first and then fundraising next. It's rub shoulders with people, all good.
And when you talk about auditory displays, because I do some work in the field of interpretation, um, which is a term that has a lot of a lot of ways that people see that, but I'm thinking about like parks and museums and things like that. Obviously, displays, visual displays are huge aspects of museums and other historic sites and such. Even outdoor spaces, but also adding in those auditory components. Is that some place where you're seeing sonification have more and more applications? And maybe that's another way to connect GeoSonNet, because there are plenty of museums and other spaces that have geosciences as part of their sort of core mission and core place. The Grand Canyon, is there a sonification there somewhere that people can access? I'm just thinking of it in terms of those sorts of connections with actual visual signage or braille signage.
Well, I can tell you that historically it was challenging to make sound. Um, you could buzz a speaker, but to make actual music or systematic sound, it was quite challenging. And then MIDI came along, and over the years now everything makes noise, from your Apple Watch or any watch, to your phone, to like there are so many devices now, and they all have the capability of producing sound. So the hardware is all around us now. In addition, because of that ubiquity of hardware, it's also become easier and easier in a software or to author or to create the sound, whether it's programming languages like Python that now very easily handle sound. You don't have to, deep into the guts of C as you had to before. Everything makes sound, and everything make sound. So it's super easy. So you're seeing a proliferation of things that make sound, not always in a good way, not always in a well-designed way, not always in a way that is intuitive, like Robert was pointing out. So there's an opportunity for us as a community to show leadership and to sort of exert some design wisdom into this emerging space. So it's a good time to be in sonification. It's a good time to be in auditory displays, whether it's in museums or whether it's in hospitals, whether in lots of places. The machine that goes bing, right? Doesn't have to just go bing. It can be a much more well-designed, well-crafted, ecosystemic design that works for everybody. A lot of people can make things go bing, but we have the expertise as a community to shape that narrative.
Thank you.
Nietzsche, I hope you're taking all this in.
Yes, I am.
And all right. So we technically have 10 more minutes if anyone has questions yet. Otherwise, we'll start wrapping this up.
I can chime in with another thought. So there really is palpable value in the unknown unknowns in terms of the things that you never expected to see or to hear. At ICAD, you'll see presentations on spatial audio, head-related transfer functions. So that is spatial audio for headphones, people who are working on the leading edge of these things, acoustics, psychoacoustics, hardware design. You get a whole variety, and then these people after their talk, let's grab lunch, let's grab a coffee, let's grab a dinner. It can really open up your world in terms of the way that you're thinking about your individual project. That was the main thing I wanted to share. And then also,
Go ahead.
if you've got a new approach to sonification, you've got something that you're trying out, I highly advocate playing sound in your presentation itself. It will be very welcome. And at ICAD, I find I can be a little frustrated if there's like many presentations in a row where there's not some kind of audio filling the space. So I challenge you, and I definitely advocate that you include sound in your presentation.
I'll follow up with a comment that, in fact, ICAD has an annual award. Each conference has an award for the best use of sound in the presentation. And so, we kind of put our money where our mouth is. And also to follow on Robert's earlier comment that you'll find people who are hardware engineers, audio engineers, and that's what they do. And they publish there. They go to IEEE kinds of conferences and stuff. And it's like one corner of them is in the ICAD world, one toe, and so they come and talk about some project more closely related to sonification. But when you get talking to them, you can go nerd into their world, their other world, or there are people who are musicians and composers, and much of their world is sort of more formal music, symphonic music. But then they come to ICAD with a little bit of this, or to kind of see what's happening in the data driven music. But you can learn all about their other music. So there are relatively few people who do only sonification. Most of the people are from all of these other fields, and ICAD is kind of the center of the Venn diagram where they all kind of overlap in interesting ways, and cool things emerge.
Okay, I can't wait to start doing another round of advertising and then figuring out how many GeoSonnet people head off to their first ICAD. I think that would be pretty fun to figure out. And maybe I could be one of them. We shall see. All right. Any other questions before we wrap this up? And I really appreciate, Bruce, you taking the lead on this. I know you're super busy. And Robert, I'm really glad you showed up to give your 2 cents in here as well. The support of this group has been phenomenal. Okay.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Yep. Everyone have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.